The U.S. president is seeing red. Now, who is it to be blamed, if you may ask? The answer is Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Because according to the White House, President Donald Trump was caught by surprise last week by Israeli actions in Gaza and Syria. In fact, in both instances, the U.S. president phoned Prime Minister Netanyahu to rectify the matter. Also, an indication of the growing tension between the two leaders. Remember, Israel struck the only Catholic church in Gaza last Thursday, and that drew an immediate negative reaction from Trump, who not only called Netanyahu but also voiced his displeasure to ensure the Israeli leader released a statement calling the strike a mistake. Trump was similarly surprised by Israel's airstrikes targeting government buildings in the Syrian capital, Damascus, especially given the efforts by his administration to rebuild the war-torn nation. Perhaps that explains why Donald Trump was stumped by Bibi's actions, given the good working relationship between the two, something that's been affirmed by the White House as well.
He was caught off guard by the bombing in Syria and also the bombing of a Catholic church in Gaza, which, as you know, I addressed at my briefing last week. And in both accounts, the president quickly called the prime minister to rectify those situations.
Remember, Trump has eased sanctions for Syria, even thrown his support behind the new president, former rebel leader Ahmad al-Shara. So much so, the U.S. has even taken credit for calming tensions in Syria. Trump had hosted Bibi at the White House just days ago, and Netanyahu had grabbed headlines, even more so by making a dramatic show of handing Donald Trump a nomination letter for the Nobel Peace Prize. This during their meeting at the White House. And so for the U.S. president to have been clueless about Israel's plans to hit Syria and the Gaza church has arrived as a twin shock. But what's equally surprising is that the strong alliance between U.S. and Israel is getting increasingly marred by mutual distrust between Netanyahu and Trump. Trump may have appeared to be closer than ever to Netanyahu after U.S. joined Israel's airstrikes on Iran. But the U.S. president had hoped for Bibi's Washington visit to yield progress on a ceasefire in Gaza. That included the release of hostages still held by Hamas and a significant increase in the amount of humanitarian aid allowed in the besieged enclave. But much to Trump's disappointment, Netanyahu departed the United States without a deal. Of course, Trump has watched with growing concern as the Gaza war claims more lives, including 3 killed in last week's church bombing. Now, nearly a week on, the mediators have submitted the latest ceasefire and hostage release proposal to Hamas, and all parties are still waiting for Hamas's leaders in Gaza to respond. Trump, on the other hand, has watched with growing concern as the Gaza war claims more lives, because the 47th U.S. president wants to capitalize on the Middle East with pragmatic deal-making diplomacy, seen as a significant departure from previous U.S. administrations. Because for Donald Trump, the deal-maker, the Middle East means a windfall of investments. Moreover, all Arab partnerships with the U.S. and, of course, Israel depend upon lasting peace, carefully hinging on the two-state solution. Needless to say, for U.S., the stakes could not be higher.
Smoke billowed over the embattled southern Syrian city of Soweda, following nearly a week of bloodshed that has killed more than 300 people. And Israeli officials had agreed to allow limited access by Syrian forces into the Soweda area for the next 2 days. Reuters reporters saw a convoy of units from Syria's interior ministry stopped on a road in Daraa province, which lies directly east of Soweda. A security source told Reuters that forces were awaiting a final green light to enter the city. But thousands of Bedouin fighters were still streaming into Soweda, the Reuters reporters said, prompting fears among residents that violence would continue unabated. Clashes in Soweda broke out this week between Bedouin groups and members of the Druze minority. Syrian government forces moved in, possibly in an effort to quell the fighting, but were reportedly ambushed by Druze fighters. Israel has pledged to defend the Druze in Syria and launched airstrikes on government forces and the Syrian Defense Ministry in Damascus. Druze living in the Israel-occupied Golan Heights said they wanted more done to protect their community in Syria.
We feel very weak because we see our brothers, families, our homes, and people being killed there for no reason. Only because they are Druze, just because they want to preserve their dignity, honor, and land.
A Bedouin who fled Soweto told Reuters he'd seen Druze fighters attacking civilians. Reuters has been unable to verify reports of these atrocities, but the United Nations on Friday said it had credible reports of abuses in Soweto,
including summary executions and arbitrary killings, kidnappings, destruction of private property, and looting of homes in the southern city of Soweto.
As soon as the United States became involved in this conflict, we were able to de-escalate, deconflict. That seems to be continuing.
The U.S. intervened to help secure an earlier truce between government forces and Druze fighters.
Some clashes are continuing.
The UN said it had received reports of ongoing fighting.
ونحن نواجه هذا التحدي الجديد.
The bloodshed has posed a significant challenge to Syrian leader Ahmed al-Shara.
وكرامة شعبنا.
Shara, who has worked to establish warmer ties with the U.S., accused Israel of trying to fracture Syria and promised to protect its Druze minority.
Hundreds of Bedouin civilians evacuated Syria's predominantly Druze city of Soweto. The exodus is part of a US-backed truce meant to end fighting that has killed hundreds of people, state media and witnesses said. The ceasefire took hold on Sunday as Interior Ministry security forces deployed on Soweto's outskirts, allowing for the release of hostages and detainees held by the warring sides. A second large group of civilians will be evacuated if the situation remains calm, a Syrian security forces member said. The fighting began a week ago with clashes between Bedouin and Druze fighters. Damascus troops, sent to ease tensions, were drawn into the violence and accused of widespread violations against the Druze. With hundreds reported killed, it has posed a major test for interim President Ahmed al-Shara. The Druze are a small but influential minority in Syria, Israel and Lebanon. They follow a religion that is an offshoot of a branch of Islam. Some ultra-conservative Sunni Muslims deem their beliefs heretical. Citing the goal of protecting the Druze and keeping southern Syria demilitarized, Israel attacked government forces last week in the south and struck the defense ministry in Damascus. Washington, which has expressed support for Syria since Shara met US President Donald Trump in May, said it did not approve of Israel's strikes. US envoy Tom Barrack said on Monday the Syrian government needed to be held accountable. According to the United Nations, at least 93,000 people have been uprooted by the fighting.
As Syrian forces took up position near Soweto, the government announced Bedouin fighters had withdrawn from the city. Local residents described a tense calm in the area after days of violent conflict left hundreds reported dead. It began with factional clashes between Bedouin and Druze fighters, before Damascus sent in government troops, which were then accused of attacking the Druze. This prompted Israel to launch airstrikes at the Syrian forces as it declared support for the community. A ceasefire was agreed on Saturday, but gunfire continues to ring out, prompting President Ahmed al-Shara to urge all parties to respect the truce. The government said following deployment, clashes had been halted and Bedouin fighters cleared from the predominantly Druze region. This bloodshed underscores the challenge al-Shara faces as he tries to stitch back together a country of different sectarian and ethnic groups, which has seen 14 years of conflict. US envoy Tom Barrack said Syria is at a, quote, critical juncture where peace and dialogue must prevail.